I think I just found the verse that might change your life. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1 through 8. It's a common text that everybody is familiar with. I'm actually going to take us through a journey of the main portion that everybody has familiarity with, verses 4 through 8a. Starting with love is patient. What in the world does this really look like? So, of course, it's fair to recognize that this love that Paul is speaking about and what creates the foundation for this very chapter that so many consider the love chapter is agape love. Agape love being unconditional love, or rather the love of God. So in this text, the term patience, as we kind of get some groundwork and some definitions going here, it implies suffering, enduring, or waiting. And it's something that is given behind the determination of one's will. And another term that can be used behind this, according to the Greek language that's used here, is an abiding under, and even something that only has the capacity to grow when under pressure. It's really interesting that Paul opens up this entire description of what love is by hitting us in the face with something that is typically one of the harder things to do for us as people, to wait and to endure, to have patience. This patience has a tendency to endure. So not even just when things are going good, but also when things may not be looking so good. Maybe something you desire isn't happening as fast as you want it. Maybe a change in somebody's attitude, mindset, or way of life isn't happening in the time frame you hoped it could. Maybe a spouse, a loved one, a family member, a friend is doing something that might irritate you, upset you, aggravate you, whatever it could be. This patience that's described in this agape love that Paul is writing about has the long suffering, the endurance to pull through, which ultimately is a huge root when we talk about love. Loving somebody isn't just a feeling. Loving somebody isn't just limited to physical butterflies in the stomach. It's not just limited to feeling on cloud nine all the time. Because believe it or not, when you love somebody, you love them not just for the good things, but also through the bad things, also through really rough patches and seasons in life, also through a lot of struggles, heartache, heartbreak, a lot of those kinds of things that we go through in seasons of life. Loving somebody is loving them in the midst of all of those things. And I get it. It's uncomfortable. I get it. Going through struggles, going through troubles, going through unforeseen issues and struggles in life are not fun. It's not something we wake up every day and we're like, ooh, I cannot wait to get into some struggle today. Nah, it's not really in that manner. But what's so interesting is that this patience seems to only really be able to stretch, seems to only really be able to activate and grow when it's under some pressure, when it's under some stress, when it's under some struggles, when there's some things that have to be discussed, when there's some activities or some struggles or some issues that have to be worked out and causes some tension in relationships, causes tension with others. And this endurance is so huge for me because it's only through that test that oftentimes you're even able to really see if somebody really has love for you to wait things out, love for you to see things through, who will love for you to be present with you as you struggle, as you wrestle, as you deal with certain issues that might be happening in your life, and you need someone to be present with you in the midst of it. Love is so deep. Love is so grand. Love is so vast. Love is in a lot of ways so pure that it has the capacity to endure troubling times. It has the capacity to endure troubling seasons. It has the capacity to endure and persevere, not in a manner of, well, I'm going to love you and like you or be with you or put up with you until this happens. And until this happens, typically love has the capacity to love through those things. And I do want to come back to this because I do think there is some nuances to discuss when we talk about certain activities or certain actions, behaviors, and characteristics that can happen in relationships that actually this wouldn't be so honorable in complete context. And instead of patience, we might need to pull back and leave. But I'm going to come back to talk about that in just a few moments. But this wait has such love behind it, such grace behind it. It's not forceful. It's rather, I'm just here. I'm available, and I want to be here and available, not because of anything you can give me or that I know you can give me or anything that you have. I just choose to be present with you in this space and persevere and endure. When you're choosing to love in this space, there's a lot of things that you have to be willing to let go. Not because we're trying to just give somebody an excuse or we're just trying to cover for somebody's mistakes and poor behavior. Rather, there's a lot of instances where our patience is going to be tried because something is taking longer than we wanted it to. Or maybe something is, we're going through a season longer than we wanted to. No one likes being rushed. Doing something in a manner of rushing isn't actually love in a lot of ways. Now, granted, I know that there's so many contexts that we can apply the term rushing for, right? Rushing someone to the hospital, rushing someone to the emergency room, right? Those things are important. I'm not necessarily saying that context is what we're speaking of. But in this context, when we talk about loving someone, there are some things that we try to rush to people. We try to rush them to certain destinations. We try to rush them to where we might be. We try to rush them to where we think they should be. And in the meantime of us trying to rush them there, there's a lot of selfishness that's predicated in that. And so when we talk about needing to let go of some things, a lot of it is going to have to be our selfishness and ego. A lot of it is going to have to be us willingly confessing that even though I may want them to be this way, I may want them to be where I am, I may want them to be somewhere where I think they'll be a whole lot better off than where they are now, I also have to recognize that this isn't something that I should rush and I should force, because then we're never going to really get the true result we want. Instead, we're just going to force our way on them, force our ideology on them, force them to do what we want them to do. And in the end, it's not even shared. In the end, the love isn't even given. The love isn't even felt. The love isn't even seen. Instead, it almost seems really monstrous, really heavy, really with a point of attack. Okay, almost like a secret hidden agenda. Like people who are rushed into things and moments and spaces where you may feel rushed into, you don't really feel like you were helped, that you were guided, that someone was even possibly there for you truly. Instead, you're like, oh, I see what this is. You really just wanted me here because it benefits you. Not because it was anything for me, not because you really did this for me and my well-being. It was really because you wanted this for you in the time frame and in the space you wanted it. And I think that's something to consider when we talk about this level of love, because to be long-spirited, I mean, to be forbearing, to be long-suffering, that means there's a lot of trials in the midst of this love. That means there's going to be a lot of struggles that you face in the endurance of love that you choose to move in. And this love that God chooses to move with us. And as a result, we have the capacity to move among others with. There's going to be a lot of struggles. There's going to be a lot of heartache. There could be a lot of grieving that takes place. There could be a lot of trouble in seasons and struggles with relationships that you carry. And it's in this love that we have to build just not just the tolerance, but the willingness to go through such processes, knowing based on these values that we have in front of us biblically, that we're going to be able to make it through, that this current circumstance, even though we're not seeing eye to eye, we might be at odds. We may not be feeling each other in this moment, but it's this patience that we're able to be rooted in that's going to give us both the opportunity and space we need to come back to each other in a manner that is more loving than before, more gracious than before, more understanding than before, and be able to carry this out in our everyday walk. This patience is phenomenal. And this patience really starts with us removing ourselves from the center. It starts with us removing our selfishness, our ego from the middle of the playing field. Have you ever noticed that when you're angry? Have you ever noticed that when you're frustrated? Have you ever noticed that a lot of those times are actually due to because there are things that didn't happen the way you saw fit? A lot of the frustrations that you may carry, it may not always be because somebody is just being annoying or somebody is tripping or somebody is just doing crazy stuff. No, sometimes, a lot of times, the frustration grows the fastest because we've put our wants at the center of attention. We wanted it to be a certain way. We wanted it to be at a time frame we had planned out. We wanted it to look a certain way. We wanted the gift. We wanted the appearance. We wanted something to happen in the way that we saw fit. And because it didn't happen in the way we envisioned it, we've allowed ourselves to get frustrated. We've allowed ourselves to just basically cut off that person or cut off that space, cut off that relationship, tune it out because it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And a lot of that frustration comes and it builds impatience. It builds extreme impatience because now we're no longer willing to be gracious to the individual that we're dealing with. We're no longer willing to be gracious in our actions, in our behavior, in our words. We're no longer willing to be in that because now everything has to happen the way we see fit. And if it doesn't, it sucks. And now the whole situation sucks. The whole relationship sucks. And we just want to throw it out the window. When in truth, when in reality, y'all, this love already admits off rip by noting that it is patient, notes that there's going to be a lot of struggles and trials that one goes through as we try and attempt to move and live in this space of love. And it's the values that are present here. It's God who's the foundation of this love here, whom we rest in, that gives us the capacity to be patient with others. Get this, because he's been patient with us. How long has it taken God to deal with your heart in certain situations in your life? How long has it taken God to get you to where you are now in your faith and walk? Finally acknowledging him, recognizing him, choosing him, loving him, pursuing him, wanting to live like him and love like him and serve for him. Like all of these different aspects that we could all point back to ourselves about. God has been so patient with us. So how can we look at other people and choose to lose heart because something didn't happen our way, the way we saw fit? And if we're being honest, in the moments where we do lose heart because something didn't happen in the way we saw fit, could we even really say we loved them? I think that's a question to consider, because the one description that Paul breaks out with is this patience that is so challenging and yet so necessary if we really want to live in this space of love that is granted to us. But I also want you to consider this too, because this is also something that sticks out as well. To be patient in bearing the offenses and injuries of others. So to be mild and slow in avenging, slow to anger, slow to punish. When we think of the opposite of these things, when we are impatient, when we do lack patience in certain areas, we're quicker to leave. We're quicker to get upset. We're quicker to get frustrated. And we're even quicker to hand out doses of punishment, whatever extreme that might be. But in this description of love, it's the complete opposite. Love does not look like dishing out punishment due to impatience. What love actually looks like is continuing to pour grace into an individual, giving grace to an individual who has continued to potentially make poor decisions, who has continuously reset themselves and went backwards, but having this patience with them to consistently love them, to consistently pour into them is something that will actually create the change you want to see. So not rising to anger quickly, because that doesn't solve the problem. I mean, it might give you an immediate solve, right? It might give you an immediate resolute, right? It might give you an immediate one. Oh, okay, so yep, I got angry at my kids, my nieces and nephews. I got angry at somebody who maybe looks at me as an authority figure. And so how I decided to handle the situation was to raise my voice, was to raise my hand, was to hand out some kind of physical consequence. And sure, after that, you might get the result you wanted. Sure, it's possible that you might get the result you were looking for. And over time, the more that happens, the more your relationship deteriorates. Whereas when we choose to do things in love, and we choose to do things lovingly, we choose to do things in a manner that is very gracious, very merciful, very calming, just very slow to anger and slow to punishing, but more to speak life into that individual when they're down, more to uplift that individual when they're feeling guilt, more to being able to be present with that person as they're going through the struggles that they're dealing with. These things are a whole lot more helpful than choosing the route of just dishing out punishment because we can and because we have the power to. And we know that, hey, if we just put pause on this person real quick, I'm sure they'll straighten up. I'm sure they'll straighten up, when really we want to play the long game because the long game is more beneficial. And that long game is being patient. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we are literally opened up with when it comes to love. Love can't be something that creates early exits. This love that is rooted in 1 Corinthians 13 deals with walking through a lot of seasons where struggle, trouble, and issues take place. And there's going to be a need for perseverance, long suffering, endurance to be able to get through those seasons, because it won't always be like this. And it's the love that will create the change desired to be seen in order for the greatest impact and transformation to take place. So those are some thoughts regarding this love. And I want to summarize all of this and then also get to a point of discussing maybe how this could even be taken out of context, depending on the type of situation or relationship one may be dealing with others. It's interesting to keep in mind that the first summary point we want to make is that this love, this patient love, is enduring, slow to anger, slow to wrath, and is unwilling to lose heart. One of the biggest descriptions I saw as we were studying this was this idea of unwillingness to lose heart. And I know that we've all been and dealt with some level of heartbreak from other people, friendships, relationships, where somebody just all of a sudden lost heart for us, all of a sudden lost love for us, had no more love for us. And I think it's when we're rooted in this agape love that Paul is discussing, gives us the capacity to not only respond to others graciously in moments where we have been offended, moments where we haven't received the love ourselves. It gives us an opportunity to respond to others graciously and gives us the capacity to love others consistently because we're rooted in a consistent, unconditional love. So in other words, don't choose to take early exits because struggles and troubles arise. Rather, the very first description that Paul gives us here about love is recognizing that there are going to be some seasons of struggle, and being rooted in these principles and in these biblical values is what's going to uphold us when we face those challenges, to be able to persevere because we're rooted in God, who is love. Patience doesn't have a timetable. So even if it does take them some years, even if it does take them a long time to get out of it, it's the consistency of love that will give them the room and capacity to begin to really do and perform and move in the changes of transformation that we desire to see in them. And it's so interesting when I say that, because I also do want to say that for somebody to just randomly tell you that they fell out of love with you, I don't think they were ever rooted in this love. I really have a hard time believing that they were ever rooted in the love of the eternal Father. Because think about how patient he's been with you and I, as I mentioned earlier. It's a game changer when we put it in that perspective. How much God has been trying to get our attention on certain things that we're just now getting. And he's been trying to get this to us for a long time. So to be patient with other people, to be gracious to other people, and to know that this love has the capacity to change and transform the lives we encounter. It's something worth being patient for, because what is love without patience truly? And I think that is a lot of what Paul shares in this first brief lining describing love being patient. Our second point is that in order to move in this love, our love must be dependent on the love of the eternal Father. It must be dependent on the love of the eternal Father. Our love being placed anywhere else. And what do I mean by that? If our love is placed in our marriage, if our love is placed in our romantic relationships, if our love is placed in our money, if our love is placed in anything else other than God, it will always have a limit. And it will always be something we look at and say, unless you give it to me, I won't give it to you. Rather, when we place our love in the eternal hand of the Father, it is God who gives us the capacity to always be willing to move in this love and continue to move in this love, even if it's not returned, because we are so satisfied in the love that God is and that God has filled us with, that we don't need the love of other people to then be able to love them. Of course, it would be awesome and wonderful if the love is returned. And if it's not, it doesn't keep us from loving them still. That's a huge challenge. But how do we overcome that challenge? By dying to our selfishness, by choosing to submit to the principles and ways of God daily with our lives. So then this leads to our next point, understanding that it's a continual process. It's a continual process. This is something that you're going to wake up every day and have to choose. There are going to be so many moments within your day, whether you're driving from to and from work or whatever location you have, and traffic's crazy. People are cutting you off. You road rage. It goes crazy. Maybe it's in the conversations you have. Somebody says something. It's a trigger word, and it just makes you feel some type of way. Maybe it's the pet peeves that you have that honestly could turn into a huge argument if you let it blow up and fester up in you long enough. Maybe it's somebody who you really care for, you really desire to build a long-lasting relationship with, but they've been kind of slow. Maybe it's something that you've told somebody and you've had to find yourself telling them over and over and over again about doing something to maybe help out with something. It's a constant reminder of something that you're asking them to do for you, and yet they seem slow to do it. Again, it's so many things that when we look at these things outwardly, we think to ourselves, like this is definitely worth something leaving. However, talk about patience. The best way patience grows is under stress. And in those moments, you can find yourself, even in the smallest moments, under stress, where patience is necessary. And it's important to allow that opportunity to work on you by building up that patience to continue loving the individual that's in front of you. And this is a daily progress. You're going to have some days that are better than others. And that's okay. The important thing is that we are getting 1% better, 1% more patient, and getting more understanding each day on why it's so important to remain in a patient space, because we really can't get to a place of loving somebody the way God loves them if we choose to always remain in our own selfishness, our own ego, our own way, instead of really choosing to rest in the love of God. Which leads me to the last thought I want to share with you, and it's this: monitor how you respond to offenses and frustrations, because the quicker you are to these spaces, the more your ego shows up. So here's my challenge to you. My first challenge to you as we dive through each description of love and as we sit and look at these things in context. I want you to go through each day, and I want you to pay attention to the things that may offend you. I want you to pay attention to the conversations you have with others. I want you to pay attention to everything that happens in your day-to-day life and monitor what emotions fester up in you and causes offense. And what do you do with that offense? How do you handle that offense? Do you blow up on them? Do you hold it in? Do you use it as a weapon later on? Do you potentially go off on a tangent in social media circles about how you can't stand this and you can't stand that, and you're passively targeting somebody through your words? What do you do with your offenses? What do you do when somebody has annoyed you, maybe angered you? Monitor these things, because I guarantee you, because I've done it so many times, I found myself angry at a result that I didn't like, upset at something that I really wanted to happen, that it didn't happen, maybe in the time frame that it didn't happen. And what happened was I got so flustered and frustrated and sad and upset because something didn't happen the way I saw fit and the timing I saw fit. And it wasn't until I recognized how selfish I was being, at the fact that I wanted everything to go my way, that then I was able to remove myself out the center, really look objectively at what took place, and not be so fast to take offense to what took place, but rather be able to continuously understand that this isn't about me. This has nothing to do with me. And I'm still in a position to love them despite a result not going my way. And if we're really going to be effective, not just sharing the gospel with others, but living out the gospel message in our lives, loving at this capacity is hard, but it's a challenge we're going to have to take on. Scripture tells us that we ought to love our neighbors as ourselves. So the determining factor of the love we give should never be based on what somebody does or fails to do for us or to us. Rather, should always be based and predicated not just on who God is and the love he's shown us. It's also based on the love we have for ourselves. And that will always determine the love we give to others, despite what's given to us. So how do we remain patient in this love? How do we remain being patient? It's being rooted in the principles and standards of the scriptures, wrapping our lives around who God is, and knowing, trusting, and believing that regardless of how somebody else loves me, whether it's they show it or they don't show it, I'm resting in knowing that God already loves me. God already chose me. God already values me. And there's not another love out in this life that could match the love that God has already given me. And it was proven through Jesus Christ on the cross. That is such a warm, healthy, comforting reality to know that I don't have to fight for the love of others because I'm already more loved than I'll ever be. And I'll never be more loved than I am right now. This love does not create early exits. This love off rip that Paul describes to us is a love that is built through endurances. So when you think about bailing, when you think about leaving something prematurely because it's not happening the way you want it, because an inconvenience has showed up. Oh, I can't believe it's taking so long. I can't believe them. It's terrible. I want you to reflect on two things. The patience that God has revealed and has done and has shown in your own life. When the inconvenience shows up and you're ready to bail out of desperation, I think you have to ask yourself, do you really truly love this individual if all it took was an inconvenience for you to leave? And if you leave, dare I say, it may be possible that you never truly loved that person for who they were. And that's a hard reality to take in. Love is patient. Love is patient. And I want to tie this all up together as well after this summary, because I know I said earlier, I get to this point, right? Well, what's the context? What's the nuances? Like, okay, what if there's abuse? Do we still remain patient? No, you leave. What if there's abuse physically, emotionally, sexually? How do we deal with that? You leave. I really am not a fan of someone staying in an abusive setting. If someone is being extremely abusive to you, everything that's just been shared is not something to apply to that situation. Rather, I think you need to leave that situation, because here's something that we have to keep in mind when we think of full context of just this verse alone, just these few verses alone, is that when we talk about a love that God is revealing himself through, that Paul is writing here, it's not only a love that is honored, but it's a love that's honorable. We can honor others with this love because this is a love that we're granting to them. And many people who move in this capacity of love place themselves in honorable positions, meaning that is someone you can honor. That is someone you can respect. That is someone that you can choose to really do and work through things with, because they're rooted in the love of God and they have no ill will, agenda, or desire to mistreat you, harm you, or do something awful to you as a result of not getting something that they wanted. When you're in an abusive situation, this is not something to apply. Rather, what I would consider and grant to you is that you need to leave. Leave that relationship, leave that situation, leave that environment, and be sure that as you leave that situation and environment, that you don't look back, and that you are able to go get the healing and help necessary to recover from a lot of the things that have taken place and transpired in such an abusive relationship. Therapy, talking with close friends, reporting that abuse, of course. When it comes to moving in this love, anybody who has placed themselves in a position where they can no longer be honored due to their actions and behaviors towards you is someone who cannot continue to receive this kind of love that you're giving. And that is no longer and never was a fight for you to take on. So do yourself a favor. Leave that for your own health and good and benefit. So that was just the first one. That was just the first description that we're going to go through. We're going to go through each description that's given in Paul's writings. And I pray that it brings some clarity. I pray that it opens your heart. And I pray that you're able to start seeing love in some deeper perspectives than maybe you have before, that will challenge you to go out into others you encounter and be loving to them in the way that is described to us in 1 Corinthians 13, that is rooted in the foundation of agape love, which is God, who is love. Smash the like button, share this with a friend, share this with somebody who you think would be greatly benefited from seeing this. Go out and move in love today. And as always, until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy, my friend. Peace. Yo, listen, I've got something amazing in the works for you available right now. If you're somebody who's looking to make this year your best year yet at diving into your faith and allowing it to become more applicable in your life. Never known where to start. You've always been confused. It feels overwhelming. Maybe you feel you don't have time. You don't know how to apply the Bible into your life. You have so many questions and thoughts as to what makes sense. How does it make sense? Don't worry. Your boy's got you covered with the Faith Factory. Click the link down in the description below, and in this Google document, you will find a plethora of resources that are at your disposal for you to be able to grow in your faith. I'm talking Bible plans, content creators to follow and subscribe to that better will enrich your faith, resources, links, books, all of that good stuff, even worship playlists, something to jam out to as you progress through your day. I really think this can be the start of something good for you and the lives around you by locking in and making sure that this year is your best year spiritually, therefore making it your best year ever. Don't forget to click the link in the description and go be great.